Oh, that's probably the heater you can hear. No worries. Advanced audio properties. Maybe there's something in here where I can, Oh, excuse me. Filters. Compressor, expander, gain, invert polarity, limit, noise gate, noise suppression. Please specify the name of the filter. Noise suppression. Method. Close. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's great. I will start recording. Been pretty inconsistent about what I record. Alright, big dog. Let's read. Let's get up a photo of Dan Gilb. That's not right. That's a good one. Save image to downloads. While we're here, let's download yesterday's meeting. Download and download. And then the recipes, we're going to make sure they've already been downloaded. From the 12th, downloaded. 13th, downloaded. 19th, downloaded. Great. Delete. 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 And delete. It's great. That's done. All right. Oh, I must have shut down my computer. Let's get Danny Gilbert up. Let's see whether we can actually get better quality. Dan Gilbert. Great. Great. That's good. Downloads, thinking. That's good. And this, put that there. Oh wait, no, we're gonna switch these. Oh, excuse me. I don't know what they got me eating. But I do enjoy it. Oh, it's all these Cheez-Its I've been eating. That's right. Alright, let's do it. I'm still gotta organize my office, organize my files, but that's alright. Huh? What's that? Oh, that's not this? Golly. Golly, why do you make it so I can click on things that ain't even visible? Oh no. There we go. we go. There we go. And oh, last thing we want to do. Oh, I thought he was on the front. Okay, it's not. All right, that's very good. We're ready to go. Oh, and the next one is Ramachandran. So that's great. All right, and we can probably just knock this whole chapter out right now. Okay, let's go. So from John Brockman's Thinking, on page 55, we have by Dan Gilbert, chapter 4, Affective Forecasting. Bro, what if I put the mic upside down? Okay, chapter 4, Effective Forecasting, or dot dot dot, the big Wambasa, what you think you're going to get and what you don't get when you get what you want. Affective forecasting, or the big Wambasa, colon, what you think you're going to get and what you don't get when you get what you want. Don't know how to read that, but this, you read it yourself. Okay? That's probably super small, huh? Well, okay, Daniel Gilbert, professor of psychology, Harvard University, author, Stumbling on Happiness. This is an introduction by the editor, the Brock. Introduction by John Brockman. In 1968, I was sitting at the back of a seedy Sunset Strip nightclub in Hollywood, having a few drinks with a friend, an actor, who, in the blink of an eye, had unexpectedly become an overnight sensation. An actor's actor, highly regarded by his peers, he was now in the middle of the actor's dream fantasy. Bet he wasn't satisfied. Bet it was like, oh, now I gotta do the EGOT, bro. Highly regarded by his peers, he was now in the middle of the actor's dream fantasy. Oh, this is about affective forecasting, which is about how you expect to feel when you get what you want, except we're bad at forecasting our affect. An actor's actor, highly regarded by his peers, he was now in the middle of the actor's dream fantasy on the covers of national news magazines, Women, Acclaim, and Work. Or was it an actor's nightmare? The big Wambasa, he said quietly. What? I asked. The big what? It's the big Wambasa, Johnny. What you think you're gonna get and what you don't get when you get what you want. The big Wambasa. Indeed, over the years I've thought a lot about this highly intuitive formulation. But it wasn't until I met Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert that I found out that syndromes such as the big Wambasa had become a legitimate subject of scientific inquiry, and at no less a place than Harvard's Social Cognition and Emotion Lab, which is bringing scientific rigor, which is which is bringing scientific rigor to the study of subjective experiences such as satisfaction and happiness. Gilbert is well known for his work on what he and his longtime collaborator Tim Wilson of the University of Virginia call affective forecasting, which is the ability to predict one's hedonic reactions to future events. So hedonic pleasure. So again, affective forecasting is the ability to predict one's hedonic reactions to future events. Should we write that down on screen? How do we change the color, bro? So that color. This is not right, though. That's not right. Trash can, trash can, trash can. Oh, can't find it. Set color, custom color. Um, what? Now I can't do anything? Where is the custom color? Oh, select color. I can't escape. Where is the window? Select color. Oh my gosh. I can't click anything. There must be some window somewhere. I have to do something. But I don't see it. So now it won't let me click anything. I can't click anything in the app. And I see no other window when I right click on the icon. Ah, here it goes. Okie dokie. Anywho, let's go black. Okay. That didn't do shit, bro. Select color. Black. Okay. Great. Alright. Alright, that's fine, bro. That's fine. Affective forecasting, the ability to predict one's hedonic reactions to future events. Not ideal. That's fine. He points out that many economists believe that affective forecasting errors are impediments to rational action and hence should be eliminated. Oh, many economists believe. Okay, so this is going to be wrong because economists are dumbasses that should just focus on studying money, but thought that they could also just study humans without any kind of psychology. But they ended up just studying, as we saw in the last chapter, Homo economicus. Homo economicus. Anyway, he points out that many economists believe that affective forecasting errors are impediments to rational action and hence should be eliminated, just as we would all agree that illiteracy or innumeracy are bad things that deserve to be eradicated. But cognitive errors may be more like optical illusions than like illiteracy. The human visual system is susceptible to a variety of optical illusions. But if someone offered to surgically restructure your eyes and your visual cortex so that parallel lines no longer appear to converge on the horizon, you should run as far and fast as possible because it's not actually advantageous for you to not see parallel lines as appearing to converge on the horizon. That is advantageous. Gilbert approaches these issues as a scientist, not a clinician. He is interested in learning how people can become better affective forecasters, but not because I believe that people should become better affective forecasters. My job as a scientist is to find and explain these errors and illusions, and it is up to each individual to decide how they want to use our findings. That's important, big dog. All right, now let's hear from Big Dog himself, not just quoted by the editor. Here we go. Economic decisions are inherently affective forecasts. Economists believe that people engage in economic transactions in order to maximize their utility. Now, for psychologists, the word utility isn't particularly meaningful unless you are talking about gas and electricity. Psychologists argue that utility is actually a stand-in for something like happiness or satisfaction. Some subjective hedonic state of the decision maker. That sounds a bit squishy to modern economists who often confuse utility with wealth. But how could it be otherwise? People engage in economic transactions in order to get things that they believe will provide them with positive emotional experiences. And wealth is nothing more than an experience credit that can be used to attain those experiences in the future. It's kind of a big deal, isn't it? And then it's funny when you realize all your experiences are just to accumulate experience credit. Wealth is nothing more than an experience credit that can be used to attain those experiences in the futures. In the future. Is this what he's saying that this is true? Because there's definitely something valuable in that, but also something shocking. People engage in economic transactions in order to get things that they believe will provide them with positive emotional experiences. That sounds like we're describing people as rational. I mean, because that's not actually, they're not, every time they're engaging in an economic transaction, it's not because they, okay, but maybe that's just a simplification. People engage in economic transactions, we could say, in order to get things that they believe will provide them with positive emotional experiences. And wealth, we could say, is nothing more than an experience credit that can be used to attain those experiences in the future. Just adding a little squishiness to it makes that sentence sing more to me. Anyway, so rational economic behavior requires that we look into. Okay, so he said it. I don't think he's saying this is. I don't know. So rational economic behavior requires that we look into the future and figure out what will provide that experience and what won't. As it turns out, people make systematic errors when they do this. Oh, okay, so he is saying this is what happens. We can say. As it turns out, people make systematic errors when they do this, which is why their economic decisions are so often suboptimal. Affective forecasting. Is that a chapter that we can recommend to Jeremy from Yans? I think it is, isn't it? I think it is. I'm really feeling like I'm gonna see it. So we have the affect heuristic, but that's not it. Expectation. Maybe he has it in the sequel. You are now less dumb. Oh man. So glad we have this one as well. That's wonderful. But it's not in there. But it definitely is in the art of thinking. Clearly. And so that I want to tell Jeremy. Let me just send a message real quick. Let's get him a link. Let's make it real easy. Let's make it real easy. Affective. Maybe the Decision Lab has something good, huh? The Decision Lab. Great. Awesome. That's good. What's TDL? Oh, the Decision Lab. Great. And let's keep track of this also. Great. Awesome. Um, Great. All set. Okay, so back to affective forecasting. So we said, as it turns out, people make systematic errors when they do this, which is why they're economic decisions are so often suboptimal. The problem lies in how we imagine our future hedonic states. We are the only animals that can peer deeply into our futures. The only animal that can travel mentally through time, preview a variety of futures, and choose the one that will bring us the greatest pleasure and or the least pain. This is a remarkable adaptation, which incidentally is directly tied to the evolution of the frontal lobe, the pink bit. Oh, not all the pink. The pink bit. The pink bit. This is a remarkable adaptation, which, incidentally, is directly tied to the evolution of the frontal lobe, because it means that we can learn from mistakes before we make them. We don't have to actually have gallbladder surgery or lounge around on a Caribbean beach to know that one of these is better than the other. We may do this better than any other animal, but our research suggests that we don't do it perfectly. Let's add this to the sense illusion. We may do this better than any other animal, but our research suggests that we don't do it perfectly. Our ability to simulate the future and to forecast our hedonic reactions to it is seriously flawed. And people are rarely as happy or unhappy as they expect to be. What kinds of errors and mistakes do people make? The first thing to note is that psychologists who study errors of judgment are only interested in systematic errors. There's a difference between an error and a systematic error. If you're standing in front of a dartboard and you're trying to hit the bullseye, you are bound to miss sometimes, but your errors will be randomly distributed around the middle of the dartboard. The mere fact that you can't hit the bullseye every time is not particularly interesting or unusual. And the mere fact that people are inaccurate in predicting their hedonic reactions to future events is not interesting or unusual either. But if every time you miss the bullseye, if every time you miss the bullseye you made a particular kind of error, for example, if all of your misses were 20 degrees to the left, then something interesting and unusual might be happening. And we start to wonder what it was. And we might start to wonder what it was. Perhaps you have a visual deficit. Perhaps the dart is badly weighted. Perhaps there's a strong air current in the room. Systematic errors beg for scientific explanations, and as it turns out, the errors that people make when they try to predict their emotional futures are quite systematic. Specifically, people tend to overestimate the impact of future events. That is, they predict that future events will have a more intense and more enduring hedonic impact than they actually do. We call this the impact bias. Did not know that. Did not know that. Did not know that. Do we have the impact bias in here? I could have sworn I remember saying, oh, because there's the affect heuristic, which is not the same as the affective, as affective forecasting. Impact bias. I think I've seen that somewhere. You know what? Maybe that we don't want to overwhelm anybody, but at the same time, the affect heuristic is not the same thing as affective forecasting. Correct. Ooh, that's a long one. Um, we don't want to send him all of these. We don't want him to wake up to 3 things. All right. Um, this is affect heuristic, right? Let's make this a checklist. Let's make this a checklist. Fine. No, we don't want you to see people's emails. Fuck. Didn't mean to do that. That's alright. So we won't share it with them right now. We're not gonna worry about that right now. So impact bias falls under the affect heuristic. I want to see whether that's in here. I mean, affective forecasting. Great. Oops. Do you see it, big dog? Here it is. Nice. Oh, this is so good, dude. If only the guy had understood. Oh man, this is wonderful. This is awesome. This is so awesome. So we have impact bias. That's great. This is so fucking awesome. We have so much fucking work to do. This is great. And I got to contribute to the first ever proper taxonomy, bro. I didn't contribute much. But this is awesome. This is awesome. Okay, carrying on. Okay, so specifically, people tend to overestimate the impact of future events. That is, they predict that future events will have a more intense and more enduring hedonic impact than they actually do. We call this the impact bias. Let me give you a couple of real world examples of this bias. We've done dozens of studies in both the laboratory and the field, and the general strategy of the research is really very simple. We ask people to predict how they will feel minutes, days, weeks, months, or even years after some future event occurs, and then we measure how they actually do feel after that event occurs. If the two numbers differ systematically, then we have one of those interesting and unusual systematic errors I mentioned. We've seen the impact bias in just about every context we've studied. For example, we've studied numerous elections over the last few years, and voters invariably predict that if their candidate wins, they're going to be happy for months, and if their candidate loses, they'll be unhappy for months. In fact, their happiness is barely influenced by electoral outcomes. We see the same pattern when we look at the dissolution of romantic relationships. So here are some examples. Let me give you a couple of real world examples. 1. Electoral outcomes. 2. Dissolution of romantic relationships. People predict that they will be very unhappy for a very long time after a romantic relationship dissolves. But the fact is that they are usually back to their baseline in a relatively short time, a much shorter time than they predicted. Professors expect to be happier for years after getting tenure. Professors expect to be happier for years after getting tenure than after being denied tenure. All right, well, you understand what that's to say. Professors expect to be happier for years after getting tenure than after being denied tenure, but the two groups are equally happy in a brief time. Please understand that I'm not saying that these events had no impact. Of course, promotions make us feel good and divorces make us feel bad. What I'm saying is that whatever impact these events have, it is demonstrably smaller and less enduring than the impact that people who experienced them expected them to have. Now, notice something about these events. They are remarkably ordinary. We aren't asking people to tell us how they'll feel after a Martian invasion. Most voters have voted and won before. Most lovers have loved and lost before. Oh, yeah. Right. Now, I'm going to read that again. Now, notice something about these events. They're remarkably ordinary. We aren't asking people to tell us how they'll feel after a Martian invasion. Most voters have voted and won before. Most lovers have loved and lost before. For the most part, the events we study are events that people have experienced many times in their lives, events about which they should be quite expert, which makes their inaccuracy all the more curious and all the more interesting. The question then is not whether there is an impact bias, because that has been amply demonstrated both by our lab and by others. The question is why? Pause. It is amazing. Imagine just watching a human uh, who has had breakups before and has returned to baseline in a relatively short time, shorter than they expected. They thought they'd be suffering for a year, but they only suffered for 3 months. And then they're in a relationship and it's not going well. A breakup is approaching. And even though every time in the past that they thought that it was going to take them a year and it only took them a few months, again this time they're like, oh man, but I'm going to need like a year to recover. So, if we do, I don't know about whether I should move right now because, if we break up, then and I'm in a new place, that's going to be really difficult for the whole first year. And so then you make some major decision based on this incorrect forecasting. Not to mention that the forecasting might become correct as a self fulfilling prophecy, right? The brain is a prediction machine. So if you expect, I mean, thank goodness for their research, it isn't every time, but sometimes if you expect to be unhappy for, well, I don't know, that expectation couldn't keep you unhappy for a whole year. But if because you expect to be unhappy for a whole year, you sign up for things um, like, or because you expect to be unhappy for a year, you don't reach out to friends. You're like, I'm going to need a year to just be by myself and be depressed and not bother anyone else. And so you make that decision to, I don't know, to, I'm having trouble coming up with good examples. But anyway, so you make some decision like, oh, I'm gonna need a year, or yeah, okay, you're in a job. Okay, you're in a job. You're thinking about leaving that job, but because you're probably gonna break up, she's probably gonna break up with you. You're like, I better not leave my job because that's gonna be too much. I was ready to leave my job, don't really like my job, but I better not leave it now because then I'll be dealing with a new job on top of all the sadness from the breakup, and then, you know, people, I don't want that to be the first impression I give, this depressed guy walking around, so I'm not going to take the new job. So then you stay in your old job, which was making you unhappy, and then your unhappiness you attribute to the breakup, but it's because you're in that job still. And then then a year goes by, and you're like, yeah, of course, I'm depressed because of the breakup. No, no, you would have been fine. You're depressed because of that job that you knew that you were supposed to leave and you're about to leave. But then because you're so bad at affective forecasting and also you misattribute things all the time, here you are actually having been depressed for a year, which is just going to reaffirm your incorrect forecast, bro. Oh my goodness. Trouble. So the question then is not whether there is an impact bias, because that has been amply demonstrated by our lab and by others. The question is why? Why are we such strangers to ourselves? There are a couple of different answers to this question. Most robust phenomena in nature are multiply determined, which is to say that when something happens all the time, there are probably a lot of independent mechanisms making it happen. Multiply determined. That's great. That's what we found with the impact bias. Remember, most robust phenomena in nature are multiply determined, which is to say that when something happens all the time, so there's some phenomenon in nature, there are probably a lot of independent mechanisms making it happen. That's what we found with the impact bias. Let me tell you about a few of the mechanisms that seem to give rise to the impact bias. First, people have a tremendous talent for changing their views of events so that they can feel better about them. We're not immediately delighted when our wife runs away with another guy, but in fairly short order, most of us start to realize that she was never really right for me, or that we didn't have that much in common. Our friends snicker and say that we are rationalizing, as if these conclusions were wrong simply because they are comforting. In fact, rationalization doesn't necessarily mean self-delusion. These conclusions may actually have been right all along, and rationalization may be the process of discovering what was always true, but previously unacknowledged. That is not an unimportant point. But it really doesn't matter from my perspective whether these conclusions are objectively true or not. What matters is that human beings are exceptionally good at discovering them when it is convenient for them to do so. Shakespeare wrote, "'Tis nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so." And in fact, thinking is a remarkable tool that allows us to change our views of the world in order to change our emotional reactions to the world. Once we discover how wrong our wife was for us, her departure is transformed from a trauma to a blessing, brother. Now, it's not big news that people are good at this. What is news is that people don't know they're good at this. Rationalization is largely an unconscious process. We don't wake up in the morning and say, "Today I'm going to fool myself." Rather, soon after a bad event occurs, unconscious processes are activated, and these processes begin to generate different ways of construing the event. Thoughts such as, "Maybe I was never really in love," seem to come to mind all by themselves, and we feel like the passive recipients of a reasonable suggestion. Feel like the passive recipients of a reasonable suggestion. Because we don't consciously experience the cognitive processes that are creating these new ways of thinking about the event, we don't realize they will occur in the future. Oh, thank goodness I passively received this thing. But since I didn't do it, I don't know that it's going to happen again. It just randomly came out of nowhere. No, it didn't. It's part of you. You didn't experience doing it, but you did it, and you'll do it again in the future, big bro. Because we don't consciously experience the cognitive processes that are creating these new ways of thinking about the event, we don't realize they will occur in the future. One of the reasons that we think bad things will make us feel bad for a long time is that we don't realize. So this is like another thing, right? You're not listing them well. That's okay. I'm not mad. I'm just, you know what? I shouldn't have said that. I just need a little more help. I just need to spend a little bit more time figuring out what the list is. So he says, let me tell you about a few of the mechanisms that seem to give rise to the impact bias. So we have first, rationalization. That's the first one. And we're still talking about that one. That we're good at it and don't realize how good we are at it. Great. One of the reasons that we think bad things will make us feel bad for a long time is that we don't realize that we have this defensive system, something like a psychological immune system, if you will. If I were to ask you to predict how healthy you would be if you encountered a cold germ and you didn't know that you had a physical immune system, you'd expect to get very sick and perhaps even die. Similarly, similarly, when people predict how they're going to feel in the face of adversity, not knowing they have this psychological immune system leads them to expect more intense and enduring dissatisfaction than they will actually experience. We have several studies demonstrating this point. For example, if you ask subjects in an experiment to predict how they will feel a few minutes after getting negative feedback about their personalities from a clinician or computer, they expect to feel awful. And they expect to feel equally awful in both cases, whether it's a clinician or a computer. But when you actually give them that feedback, they feel slightly disappointed, but not awful. Moreover, they feel much less disappointed when the feedback came from a computer than from a clinician. Why? Because it's much easier to rationalize feedback from a computer than a clinician. After all, what does a machine know? What's interesting is that subjects don't realize in prospect that they will do this. Results such as these suggest that people just aren't looking forward to their opportunities for rationalization when they predict their future happiness. It's such a big deal. And I wish I knew about this yesterday. This is so obviously immediately beneficial to know. And also, I wish Ruby had talked about this a bit. I think she did maybe mention it. Consider Consider another mechanism that causes the impact bias. Consider another mechanism that causes the impact bias. I spend a lot of time asking people to imagine how they would feel a year after their child died. As you can imagine, this makes me very popular at parties. Everybody gives the same answer, of course, which is some form of, I would be totally devastated. Then I ask them what they did to come to that conclusion. And they'll almost always report that they had a horrifying mental image of being at a funeral at which their child was being buried, or of standing in the child's room looking at an empty crib, etc. Of course, that's not going to be all your moments, is it? These horrifying images serve as the basis for their predictions, which, as it turned, would this count as availability heuristic? No. What is this when we judge something according to the image that pops into our head, and then we just like leave it at that? Oh, and also the question is, how would you feel a year after the child died? So the image of being at the funeral isn't actually relevant, which is why I want to know what this, what we call this heuristic. Ah, immune neglect. Bro, it not what I'm looking for now. But immune neglect is what Dan Gilbert just talked about. And fading affect bias is kind of what we're talking about now. And then immune neglect, that's going to be about rationalization. Okay, yeah, neglecting your psychological ability to adapt to negative events. Uh, so, and then maybe with us within that would be neglecting your psychological ability to adapt to negative events via rationalization. Very cool. For instance, Dan Gilbert talks about asking people how they'd feel a year after their child passed, and they say they'd be devastated, 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 and then um, when he asks how they came to that conclusion, say, mention a mental image of standing at the funeral. Hold on, I might know this. I feel like I should know this. I got nothing. I don't agree with you. I don't agree. No, because yeah, that's about how available it is, but that's not it.
pointing to is a crucial and often overlooked cognitive phenomenon. It doesn't have a perfect name in psychology, but it's real and underlies a huge range of interpretive and communicative behavior. Here's a refined way to describe it. Definition: working. The tendency to respond not to the literal content of a prompt, e.g., question or statement, but to the image, scenario, or implication that the prompt evokes. Here are some candidate terms or framings that have been used to describe overlapping ideas. 1. Image response bias, not an official term, but intuitive. This describes how we respond to the mental image or evoked scenario, rather than the words themselves. Example: someone asks, is she qualified for the job? And you answer, she went to Harvard. The response is to the mental image of competence, not the logical question about specific qualifications. 2. Pragmatic inference. In linguistics and philosophy of language, this refers to how listeners infer unstated meanings based on context and implications, not just the literal words.
Gracian.
Related to Grecian implications, people assume speakers are being relevant, informative, etc., so they respond to the implied scenario. 3. Stimulus interpretation bias. This is a general cognitive tendency where we interpret a stimulus in terms of what it reminds us of, rather than what it technically is. Could be considered a subcase of salience bias, availability heuristic, or even schema activation. 4. Projection response. This could describe when the response is shaped by the projected scenario the listener generates, the meaning or situation they see behind the words. Number 5. Construal-based responding. In social cognition, construal is how we mentally represent a situation. So this would mean responding to one's construal of a prompt, the subjective mental frame, rather than its formal content. None of these terms fully capture the clarity of what you're pointing to. If you're naming it as part of your theory, I'd recommend coining a term that highlights this response to evoked image dynamic. Maybe something like evoke response bias, construal echoing, imagery latching, scenario substitution, prompt projection bias. Would you like to refine or coin a new term for it within IT theory?
You know what? Evoke response bias is good. Evoke response bias, that's not bad. That's fun. That's fine. You are so lucky to have gotten the chance to see it happen live. So prompt, construal, heuristic. So ChatGPT, prompt construal heuristic explains why the evoke response bias livers. It's not bad, bro. Not bad at all, bro. Alright, how much more of this? Oh, oh, okay. Quite a bit. I think we have to go now. They left at 8:30 and said they'd be back in an hour and a half. So that's like now. Damn. Alright, we'll stop there. We'll stop there. Alright. Okay, good day, big dog. I'll probably see you later.